stay with me in the morning. You only hold me when I sleep. I was meant to treat the water, but now I've gotten in too deep. For every piece of me that wants you,
is everybody in? Stu? They're all coming in? Perfect. They're all coming in? They're all coming. They're all coming in. Still have time.
Please give me something, 'cause someday I might know my heart.
Oh yeah.
Just to spend a little time alone with me. And I can say I've never bought you flowers. I can't work out what they mean.
As people are walking in, just wanted to make you aware of some of the other things that IEEE CT SOC has on the go. And we try to, in our events, weave in a lot of the principles that we are gaining from the different conferences and events like this. So we have the Games, Entertainment, and Media that'll happen in Barbados in November. Games, Entertainment, and Media. And it'll take a three-faceted approach: the research, the practitioner, which includes regulator, and also the entertainment body, the artists, on how they use these medias. And obviously, privacy and user digital privacy and the social media parts of all this are going to also be addressed, right? So we can try and infuse this into the developers' minds and move them in the direction that this event right here is intended to move things. There's a quantum workshop coming up as well in Colorado. It's part of Quantum Week. Rafael Sotelo, who's got the camel colored jacket on, is heading that up. And we have conferences that'll happen. Our flagship conference will happen in 2023, almost in parallel with the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And we have a similar one that is parallel with IFA. It's equivalent to CES show in Berlin, happening in September. We also have a conference in Asia that's very regional and research-based, in Japan as well, life sciences and consumer electronics and so on. So just to let you know, the slides are coming up or have come up. And with us right now is Stephen Tiell from Accenture. Now, he's asked me to say that he's short and he's sweet. Or sorry, he asked me to say something that was short and sweet. That was it. That was it. Yeah, you're taller than I am for sure. Okay, so Stephen, he leads the responsible innovation at Accenture. And in this capacity, he works with clients in public and private sectors on cutting edge strategic work. Otherwise, it would be boring, right? He also serves as a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council GeoTech Center. Stephen, thank you.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay? There's a heckler in every crowd, even a small one. Look at that. That's great. I want to talk about digital trust today, because this is what came to my mind when someone asked me if I would talk to this group and talked about some of the topics here. The first trend to discuss is really how data about you is becoming your data. And I like this because I think 98% of the time when I hear someone talk about my data, it's really not their data. And they have this misconception that anything about them is owned by them, when they've already checked the box and clicked the button, which, as we all know, is sufficient for notice and consent, right? So I want to talk about a specific use case of this that I think is really interesting. When we talk about kind of Web3, everybody likes to throw that term around, right? And I look at Web3 as my big picture view of it is really that transition from data about me to becoming my data. And that is the enabler of that. So one of the really interesting use cases I got to come in contact with over the last year is a retailer who was looking at an issue of the smart home. The devices were selling really fast. It was their highest growth category and also their highest return category. People got them home. They couldn't figure out how to do it. And if you ask my wife, she's not a fan because oftentimes I have that same struggle and by golly, I'm gonna make it work. So if it takes all weekend, it'll take all weekend and it'll work. And it works great. I'm currently transitioning to it not working or it working without the cloud because when the internet goes down, so does everything in the house and I'm not sure where light switches are anymore. So that's a problem and that we're working around, but that still doesn't make the data mine. And so what we're looking at with Web3 is when you go into the store, when you purchase a smart home device and go through the checkout, it's actually provisioned by the time it goes into the bag. When you get home, the device works when you plug it in or put batteries in it. And we can do that, and the retailer can go to market with a message of privacy thanks to Web3, thanks to data about me becoming my data. And that is a differentiator in the marketplace. The next trend is really when that burden of privacy moves from the individual to those who actually benefit from those privacy intrusions. And we see this, you know, I came into contact with the first time a company took this on recently, again, the smart home theme you might recognize, a device that measures my energy usage at the panel and allows me to kind of figure out which devices are using how much energy. When they noticed a problem on the back end of what information my device was reporting, they sent me an email and said, hey, we've recognized a device. For us to look at this any deeper, we need you to opt into just this occurrence of us looking at your data or all future occurrences of when you interact with us. And you can choose between those and we will respect that. I've had 3 incidents where I've gotten that, and each time I've chosen the same thing. You can look at data from my home, this instance. They're taking on this extra burden in order to serve me better, in order to demonstrate they care about my privacy. And I'm encouraged, which I would assume you've heard more about at this conference, which is the US privacy bill that's currently the American Data Privacy and Protection Act, right? Which for the first time, we're looking at civil rights level protections on privacy. That's amazing. The ability to sue someone when your privacy intrusion causes you harm. That's absolutely amazing. We have realistic limits within scope of how data can be collected, used, and shared, or sold as in most cases. And what these are amounting to is kind of this next trend, looking at how the powerful empower the powerless. We won a deal recently, I would like to think in part because we looked at not just a policy-based approach to governance, but also a rights-based approach, where those in the metaverse who are producers, the platforms, if you will, are actually granting rights to those who are less powerful, to the creators and to the participants, rights around health, wealth, earth, equity, and trust. And when we have the powerful granting rights to the powerless, we have a bit of a paradigm shift. Now the powerful have an obligation to take on an additional burden in order to provide those rights. When we look at identity as, well, that's interesting. I did move the order on those, so that would make sense. So we're going to skip identity and we'll go to offering recourse, which actually follows the previous one better anyway. You know, Henry Kissinger famously said, "Whom do I call when I want to call Europe?" And I think that is the crux. Well, back then there wasn't the European Union, European Commission and all that, of course. And you couldn't just Google it exactly. But it underscores this notion of where do I go to seek recourse? And how do I achieve redress? And I don't have a good example here because frankly, no one's really done a good job of this. And there's an abundance of opportunity, particularly with AI technologies and the ability for those who are affected by them, who may not even know that that's why they're affected, to be able to seek recourse and to receive redress for that recourse in a timely and economically efficient manner. And the last one is really when identity becomes self-signed. We see this as distributed or decentralized identity and also self-sovereign identity. And this movement toward it, again, enabled by Web3, enabled by blockchains, enabled by a number of more recent technologies. We look at this ability that we have today to have, to be at home, to have government services provisioned to you, and still be able to do some sort of verification or validation on that identity. When identity goes digital, that becomes all the better, more fluid, and more privacy preserving. For instance, I'm buying some alcohol. I need to show proof of identity. They don't need to see my age. They just need to see a binary truth that I'm over 21. And that's sufficient. My age is not relevant in this story. And so when we look at this from a fraud perspective, this also becomes very important for Know Your Customer. We were working with a Chinese insurance company a number of years ago, and they're expanding to other parts of the world. And one thing that they hadn't planned for is the single-digit % of fraud in other parts of the world. Due to the identity ecosystem in China, called that, there is virtually no fraud. You're guaranteed to get caught. So how do you transport that to other countries where you might have 4, 5, 6, 7% fraud on your transactions? It really doesn't transfer. That company had to stop its international expansion plans. Its value decreased. Investment, well, was never the issue, but it was more difficult to attract investment because of the international expansion ability. To build that fraud detection, know your customer muscle takes time, it takes experience, and they weren't in that position to expand just yet. And so as we move to more distributed forms of identity, we also move this ability to know your customer better as well. And through all of these examples, I think there's really kind of 3 things that we come down to of, how do we build trust? And I do need to see this for a minute. This was from a collaborator in the UK who thought it would be good to get these in. So a shared purpose, a trustworthy process, and visible impact. So this is great audience participation. And I like how these three things actually build into good practices. If I want to recruit and retain top talent, they need to be able to see that their work has impact. If I want to be able to attract customers, they need to be able to trust me. My thesis for organizations in the future is really one of trust, where trust really denotes the ability to grow, the ability to have word of mouth support. You know, how recently have you heard a friend or someone recommend a product where they said, oh, this product is wonderful, but the company is terrible? That doesn't really exist. And that will cease to exist in the future. If you know that the company is terrible, you won't buy their product. And that's what we're seeing in younger generations. This is definitely a generational divide where we're seeing older generations stick with products from companies they don't agree with. But we're seeing younger generations move away from products that they may have grown up with to be values aligned with the organizations that make those products. And they're willing to move. We see the same thing with technology, and I think we're going to see it more and more and more. Thank you. Short and sweet. Yeah. The audience participation has been great so far, so thank you. You might have to turn it on.
Thank you, Stephen, for this information. And thank you for coming here to Digital Privacy and Social Media Symposium. So you were talking about the individuals, right? What about the small and medium enterprises? How can you interpret this? I know that big companies, they have service level agreements, contracts, privacy, but what about the small and medium enterprises? They need privacy.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, the way that I look at it is that small and medium businesses follow. They're not the ones leading. They're the ones using products that are designed by large organizations, by governments. And when the product that they need to protect privacy is not available, they don't use it. When the product is available and is something that they care about, excuse me, and know to discriminate against, they will use it. When there's no other products available, they'll use what's available. So I really look at it as it's incumbent upon large organizations and governments to make sure there's nothing else available.
Hi, I wanted to actually talk about the way in which I see the power dynamics between the companies and individuals changing, from the companies now competing for our attention, and how that governance structure or the dynamics of, like, the companies now becoming like the buyers, and in some way with the privacy becoming like, self-sovereign and other things coming in where the data actually belongs to me, that I now have more power than the companies, and would that mean that the company structure would completely change? Like we won't have the behemoths that we have now, or how do you see, the world in that space? Thank you.
It's a great question. Let me use an example that a friend of mine used with me a couple years ago. He likes to play chess. And say you have a chess app on your phone that you've trained over the last 3 or 4 years. It's learned your moves. It's learned how to counter those moves. It's learned how to coach you to being a better chess player. But boy, does that user interface is just terrible. A new app comes out, has slightly better features, but the real selling point is a stellar user experience. With Web3, we have the ability to not have to spend 3 or 4 years to train that new app, but to take all of the data that we have generated and just port it over to another app, provided they're able to ingest that information. So the way that I see it is, as we increase interoperability and portability, we increase the friction, or we decrease the amount of friction there is on switching costs. So I'm able to move to another platform quite readily. You know, my wife is our family album story maker, social zealot in our family, right? I haven't participated in those platforms for years because I understand what they're doing and all of that. But part of the lock-in that she has to a particular platform is because of this immense history, all the family vacations for the last decade, all the holidays and birthdays and that kind of thing. And if that friction goes down, the incentive for competition goes up. And so we start seeing competitors who might have different business models that we might find more agreeable. Business models that are focused on something other than attention. Maybe they're focused on health and well-being. Maybe they're focused on bringing families closer together, on making borders less relevant to maintain friendships. These are all things that would be compelling to me to join a platform. Does that help address your question? Yeah, so I think, you know, certainly technology companies look at users and the way they engage with their products in ways that allow them to improve their products for more people. I believe that those are genuine, altruistic, for the most part, interests, right? They're doing it to increase the joy you have with that product. In doing so, you're going to spend more time with the product, which is where the attention comes from. But really the power comes in the aggregation and the audience size that they have. The reason, you know, advertisers, you know, I found it kind of humorous. I talked with Robert McNamee once, and he was saying, you know, look, I might trash talk this company quite a bit, but that's where I spent 90% of the advertising dollars for my book. Because that's where the audience is. And until that shifts, then that's not going to change. The power these organizations have is not because they are using you know, addictive technologies or whatnot. It's because their audiences are so large. And they have an assemblage of individuals. You know, I remember when LinkedIn was bought by Microsoft, and it came down to each record in that database was worth about $6. Now, if you or I had, you know, a database of our contacts, maybe there's 5,000 of them in each. Do you think that each of those records would be worth $6 to somebody? Probably not. Nobody's going to pay you $30,000 for your address book. But if you had 30 million subscribers or 100 million subscribers or 1 billion or several billion, you become a lot more valuable.
Testing. Thanks for coming, Steve. I've been trying to work something out of my head. Maybe you can help me out here. So enterprise application, and we talked about trust, and things change. And so those things might change. The underneath technology might change. Say, for instance, you have a client and it's pulling your checking and checking information down through authorized services. And there's privacy policies that went along with that. And I trust that that happened. So many things change underneath the systems. Maybe the deal is wrong and we get another vendor to get another service to do it, what have you. The trust is still there from the customer, but the systems are changing. And other than changing privacy policies and all those kinds of things that goes along with it, do you have any kind of like idea where, because you mentioned Web3, where Web3, depending on the layer you're referring to, has any kind of place in keeping up with the change and also being transparent to the customer that this change has happened?
Yeah, I think the transparency part is tough because not enough people care. Now, if you look at the surveys, everyone cares, you know, but if you dig down into the surveys, you get to like just a couple % actually do something about it, right? But I think the big opportunity, and it's not just brought about by Web3, it exists today, is around proxies. So for instance, I might know that you are a privacy genius, right? You spend all of your time in it. You spend, you know, you speak at conferences on it. You talk with others. You are a thought leader in the space. You know what you're doing. You read every privacy policy before you sign it, right? Yeah, I know you do. And so I'm going to trust that you know what you're doing. And I have felt over time, I've learned that we actually have a similar radar. We have a similar compass. Wouldn't it be nice if across web assets, I could subscribe to you as my proxy? And I could say, whatever changes he makes, make on my account. And then I think what we'll end up with is basically flocks. The new influencer is the person who knows those settings. When you look at some of the streaming platforms that have some safety issues or safety concerns, right? It can be the case that, well, yeah, I want to play my video game and stream it. I don't want to have to worry about all this range of stuff that the platforms have to worry about now because my audience is 5 million people. I just want to play the games and stream them. Well, unfortunately, you have to pay attention to all of this other stuff because it matters to a lot of people. And so if I can just subscribe to another streamer who I know is in it for that reason, I'm going to have a lot easier time and be able to deal with that. And I think there are things with Web3 that make that better, but that's possible today.
Right on, good old fashioned pub sub. That's deep. We need to talk about that. That is deep. I like that.
And that contact happened here. All right, good stuff. Any other last minute questions? No? Would you? Oh, no? Okay. Well, I still hope that there's an appetite for more of this. Stephen, thank you very, very much for being here. As the closing speaker, after bellies were filled and thirst was quenched, we hope to have you back at our next year's event in this area.
That would be fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen.
Cheers.
Good way to round things off. And thanks most of all. I think I left some things up here. Oh, if I didn't find these, I'm going to have a scavenger hunt. Most of all, thanks for your participation, your contribution to this event. We would really love to have you back next year and have you participate in our other events, because digital privacy is not just a topic on its own. It has to span into the other things, as I was mentioning earlier. So feel free to take a copy of the agenda for today, which has contact names, and on the back has information about our upcoming events. And one of them actually is not here, is the one in Taiwan. No, it is. It's on here for Taiwan. It passed already, but that's why it's not on a slide up there, but it's on here. So that way you can make international contacts as well. And when you're on the way out, feel free to get some of the free swag out there. Yeah, take it, stuff your pockets, distribute it, tell people you were here, take some things back, gifts for the people that you left behind.